Fisher School business, as we listed on your agenda, will be a close. So we want you to understand that you can stay, pray for the record of state. Mr. Payne, we want to say good afternoon to you, and we appreciate you coming back to continue this process as we trying to get to the points of selecting the superintendent. I want to congratulate you for having been chosen as one of our founders on behalf of the Madison Parish School Board. You familiar with the protocol, so to speak, and how the interview will be conducted. So I'm not going to go back over it again, but at the time, we're going to give you information that we'll ask you to present to the board and to those of us who are in attendance. So we officially start the process of conducting an interview with you. First, you will be given up to 10 minutes to tell the board about yourself, your background, and any other information that you would like to present to the board. At this time, you can take advantage of that privilege and tell the board any information in the public, any information that you would like to share about yourself, and any other information regarding Mr. Payne. All right, Mr. Payne?
Good evening to President Dixon, members of the board that's present tonight. It's an honor to be here. Thank you. I'm very thankful to God Almighty, who's head of our life, and for each of you as board members for selecting me as a finalist to come back and meet tonight. I'm very blessed and fortunate to have served in education some 39 and a half years. One of the questions that was broached to me was, do I deem it as a disadvantage selected as a finalist to work in your system? As I explained to them that through the greater part of my career, I've actually come through this area of recruiting teachers from the universities out in the West Coast for a number of years, from the 80s all the way down until 2002, when I actually moved back to Louisiana. So I'm not a stranger. The other thing I spoke about was experience. One of the parts, whenever you have challenges, fiscal challenges, and talk with some of the staff, fiscal challenges in terms of losing students, 400 students to be exact, and you multiply that times the MFP plus your monies with Title I, you soon realize that it is a tremendous impact on your system. And having had a work experience as a former superintendent, that experience allows me to be able to hit the ground running. I've shared with each of you tonight a plan, what I call an entry plan as a superintendent, that I would surely want to implement, because it's so important that we garner support from our greater community. And that comes in the form of developing a strategic plan. You engage business owners, you engage faith community, you engage police services, your police jurors, your sheriff department, greater farmers, co-ops. You bring everyone together. You invite them to come and be at the table and to let us know what they have as expectations for our school. But at the same time, as I talk to the gentleman who handles taxes, if people doesn't pay 2 or 3 years and they're not collected, it impacts the children in the school. So experience lets me know that you have to have a person that can hit the ground and have resources, and that's something that I would bring, an opportunity to network with the university system. I believe it's so important to have a relationship with Louisiana Tech, Grambling State, and also the University of Louisiana Monroe. In addition to that, there's the Delta project that's at Mississippi Valley and down the street in Jackson, Mississippi, that the federal government has put together, where you can have a pipeline to develop teachers and support teacher education through training in the summer. So those are the kind of things that I would bring as a superintendent candidate. The ability to go and have a conversation with Senator Francis Thompson, to talk about why we have to have the resources that Del High Charter received. It's important that you have to take a stand. In public education, we can no longer sit on the sideline and believe that it's only our responsibility. It's everyone's responsibility to be committed to public education. And recently I gave a speech to business leaders in the community, and I talked about the educational, moral, and ethical responsibility that we all have to educate children. because the future leaders, job employees, those students come from the schools that we're in. We can develop our boys and girls through career pathways where they can go out and work. In addition to getting a quality education, they can go out and gain important experience out in the job field where they're job ready, being ready in a position to make all of us very successful as board members, as superintendents, and as a school district. So with that, I'm excited. I don't see it as a not positive opportunity. I see it as a great opportunity to bring together a greater community and let them know why we need them to partner with us as an educational system. In addition to that, as I talk to the person who's with the charter school, I let them know I understand they have children. And I'm a believer that you have to do things to bring children back. You have to create an elementary educational sports program. You have to bring in cheerleaders and let kids do things to let them know that in addition to going to classes, you have some extracurriculars where you give them options that they can't do. They can't do the things that we can do. According to technology, you have E-rate. You can generate 90-10. That's 90% that the feds pay, you pay 10%. And we can provide technology and open up doors to where our boys and girls and look at tech grants to expand on where we may be, getting T1 lines directly into schools so that you have enough bandwidth to make sure that your computers can run and that students, now if we have a charter program, not a charter, but like Cox Cable in the Baton Rouge area, they're partnering with schools where they will come in $10 a month and make sure that there's bandwidth in the homes that parents can get access. And those are the kind of things that I would be willing to explore as a superintendent. You have to be resourceful, you have to be an instructional leader, and you have to have a vision to bring about change. So that's what I would be about if the opportunity was to come and be a leader here in the school system.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. At this time, we will engage ourselves in Q&A among board members and yourself. I will start the process. I will repeat the question twice, and you may begin your comments. Hypothetically, you were recently employed as superintendent of the Madison Parish School. At your first meeting with your financial staff, you learned that the projected student count for 2015-2016 was actually less by approximately 150 students, which will result in a deficit of $750,000 in the general fund budget. What immediate step would you take to address this problem? Again, hypothetically, you were recently employed as superintendent of the Madison Parish School. At your first meeting with your financial staff, you learned that the projected student count for 15-16 was actually less by approximately 150 students, which will result in a deficit of $750,000 in the general fund budget. What immediate steps would you take to address this problem?
It's a very good question, President Dixon and members of the board. First and foremost, as you well know, that you can't operate your schools, you can't operate your system without a balanced budget. So you have to determine in that you have a deficiency of $750,000. Every department would have to look at a 3% to 5% reduction in order for you to begin to look at balancing. You have to immediately put a freeze on travel. You would do things to try and create and reduce the bleeding that is going on. The other significant part is actually you want to look at your prior year's expenditures and begin to take a prioritizing of those prior year expenditures and what can you do to reduce. The last thing is that costs usually come down to human capital. It means that people, if you are losing that kind of students and you're 750,000, that means you're still operating with the same amount of staff you may have had before. So you have to take a hard look across the board because you either got to produce greater revenue or you have to make reductions. And the bottom line is that you got to produce and get reduced because in public education, we've not had a spirit at the gubernatorial level that was kind to public education. Therefore, you have to girdle up yourself. The other thing is you have to take a look at those tax persons who may not have been paying their money in the last 2, 3, 4 years. So you have to look at a swath of multiple strategies. It's not one linear way you do. You have to look multiple. But again, you must first of all take a hard look internally. Are you bleeding, and are there some areas that are non-productive? And I go back to what I talked about, a strategic plan. When you have a strategic plan, you look at your objectives. You start in August and you go all the way around in June. And everybody, every department has to know that the board, the superintendent have put together, along with the greater community, of what they identify as the highest priorities that we must follow. And those priorities are what drive the cart. It makes us stay within focus. But the immediacy of, you have a deficit, you must make a hard decision and reduce. And if it means consolidation, you have to do that as a superintendent. Those are recommendations I bring back, that you cannot open your school year without a balanced budget. In Madison Parish, I had to reduce $750,000, had a week to do it, so it's doable, but you have to make hard decisions. And that means employees, finally I would say this, that means employees have to be able to do multiple jobs. When you're in a small district, you don't have the luxury of being a singular person. You have to do multiple jobs because you're losing, you're bleeding, you're hemorrhaging, we're losing students. That means your general fund, and not only the general fund, your Title I money is going out because most of those students are 100% Title I. I hope I answered your question, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Any follow-up? If not, Mr. Hamilton.
With that being said, and if you would have to implement a RIF, what procedure you would use to accomplish the feat?
Well, first of all, the law requires that the board has to take action and declare that there's an emergency. And anytime you have deficit spending, it deems an emergency. And based on that, that would be your first step. The second, you would go to your seniority list of what employees were hired. If you were doing a RIF, you would also make sure that in your policy you have a RIF procedure that would take place. Those would be your steps that you have to take. And no one, having had to do this, no one wants to be able to come in and say tomorrow, it may be your last day. It's a tough job. I've had to do that. The goal is that you can take some of those other ways that I mentioned, but the bottom line is you have to have a RIF policy, you have to have a board action, and then you have to go to work. With every department understanding that we have to look at shrinking, we have to take priorities so that we can have a balanced budget. Because if you don't balance your budget by August, end of August, and it goes to the voters, where it's put out in the paper and everything, by September 30th, you have to have your budget into the state. And in my day as being a superintendent, it had to be done. Otherwise, you had grounds to put you on immediate fiscal distress. So that would be the steps that I would approach that you must take. First, you have to have board action that you declare emergency. And from there, you work internally. Every department, HR, every person comes together. We begin to look at those employees. We begin to look at where the greatest needs are. And we bring that back, discussions, before we go out and put it out in public. That's the steps you take.
So you're saying that you would look at the RIF policy? That's the question.
Well, by law, you have to have it. You have to have it within. There's a company out of Baton Rouge that provides for most systems. In that company, there's a pretty straightforward in terms of RIF, but it's a state action. You have to declare emergency. And that emergency then dictates your RIF policy, and the RIF policy guides you on the things you do. If it's seniority or if it's based on needs, for example, special education, some of the other areas, diversity, all of those criteria that you have in the policy. I hope I answered your question.
Any follow-up? If not, Mrs. Davis.
Due to the fact that we are at the bottom of the total poll and grading wide, and what has been going on, it doesn't seem like it's working. Do you think you would have the heart to come in and ask the staff to reapply?
Well, it's a good question. I think first and foremost is I'd like to believe that the faculty and staff are hard working in the district. There may be a need to enhance and strengthen their knowledge and content, and that's where your universities work with you in providing training. I'm a believer that you have to train your faculty and staff for the month of July and support them going back to school, since most districts start the first one in August. When you talk about the bottom of the barrel, it's not where you're at, it's how you believe that you can go from where you are. And listening to some of the faculty one of the things that you're missing, you cannot make growth with a whole language reading program. You must have the big five. You have to have phonics, phonemic awareness, comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary. You have to have the big five in order for your children. Students with cultural backgrounds have to have phonics and phonemic awareness as the undergird, and in addition to comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency, in order for them to be able to develop their reading skills. Because as I was telling some individuals, I was in a system this week and having opportunity to see that we no longer have slope and perpendicular at the algebra 2 level. Now it's down to geometry. So you've got to have some tremendous reading skills when you take on those kinds of things. And it starts with us equipping our teachers with what they need to make a difference in the classroom. And by experience, having written a grant for some $700,000 in St. Helena, when we had Reading First, some of you remember when Reading First was here, and it was sad that it was taken away politically. But in answering you have to look at what you have, and if it ain't working, you got to get rid of it. Because the demands and pressure on us so hard that you have to have things that can help children excel and exceed. And I go to the classroom, I'm an instructional leader, and I can tell you within a day what you have or what you've had in place is working or not. And you can look at growth, your scores over a 3-year period. You can look at your reading scores, your comprehension. You can look at your ACT, because it bleeds out and what happens with the kids who matriculate through the system. So I hope I answered your question in terms of, you asked me a hard question, and I gave you an answer. I think you asked me, do you have to riff or lose some of the people? I like to believe that you have talent, but everybody has to understand you have to produce and get reduced, because the pressure is on us so much by Mr. and Mrs. Business Leader. They're paying taxes. They want to know that your school is producing. And you don't have to stay at D or an F. You have to have courage. You have to be willing to take the challenge on, and not worry about hurting somebody's feelings. Because, see, when people talk about you, I tell them they're going to talk about you, so let them talk about you when you're doing something positive.
Follow
If I answer your question, Ms. Davis, that was a tremendous question.
Any follow-up? If not, Ms. Richardson.
I have 2 questions. I noticed in the reviews here that you had problems with your board members overreaching, trying to micromanage what the superintendent does in your operation of schools. How would you handle that?
Well, it's a good question, Ms. Richardson. I think first and foremost, it really starts with communication and board retreats. One of the things that our trusted players we have is a board retreat where we sit down and look at our objectives and goals that we want to accomplish, and how I as a superintendent can go about making that happen. Because when you go out into the greater community, they look at all of us as being all of one. And it's not you or me or individually, but collectively. The other is we have to be about addressing the negativity that surfaces many times that comes from within. You have to take a hard stand on that. But that question that you asked me, it starts with that level.
My other question was, you brought up sales tax several times. How do you feel about a school system being the sales tax collector?
Well, generally, the police jury, in my plan, I talked about meetings with police jury. Typically, police jury works with your schools. They sometimes have that person within their realm, but that person works on your behalf and collects the money. When I was in Bogalusa, St. Helena, we had a partnership with them. We met with the person. I would look at the rosters of companies who hadn't paid taxes as much as 5 years, and I made it a habit to go visit and have meetings with them and tell them why that I thought it was important that they would put forward the effort, because our children need it. And I got companies like Dow Chemical who were not putting up the kind of money they should. I happened to go at that time to our senator in D.C., had a meeting, and he sat on the board for Dow, and things changed immediately. So you have to have courage to go out and make sure. That's why I talked about tax collection. You have to look at the roster as a superintendent, business manager. We have it, superintendent, we look at that. And also the person who is collecting. Nobody gets off when you are at a deficit. Everybody's got to pay up. So you have to have courage to go out and communicate first, send a communication letter, and then follow up. You beat the path, make sure that it's coming in. And when you have a heart-to-heart conversation, most companies and businesses understand the importance and the need that you have as a system. I'd like to also talk to many of the farmers. I look at the amount of farming you have in your community, your co-ops. Most of them only generate $15 per acre. So there's some other things that they can do to help. And that's why we want to have that group. It's two very important. I hope I answered for you.
Thank you. Ms. Payne, follow up. If not, Ms. Hargrave? Ms. Hargrave?
Yes, Mr. Payne. How would you, if elected superintendent, propose to build public pride and trust, sustain fiscal integrity, and raise educational standards within the Madison Parish School District?
Tremendous question. I talked in my plan about a strategic plan, building a 5-year strategic plan. And you have to bring all of the stakeholders together and let them know that you need them to be a part of this process. You can no longer, as a school system, go on this journey by yourself. I'm a believer that you have to network and you have to let everyone know. We invite them to the table. And that strategic plan is a process that we work towards. It can be up to a year to develop it, but that's putting things together. But you bring them and let them know we want their input. We value them. We want them to share with us the good, bad, and ugly that they don't believe that we're doing. We're doing some things good. We want to know that. We want to know what we can improve on. That's one of the most important parts you have to do to bring the consciousness of those in any greater community to recognize that we want to hear from them. The second thing along that line is public trust starts with how we as professionals carry ourselves. See, I can't talk about you on Sunday about how bad a teacher you are and don't believe it affects me. Because people hear from us negative things and we talk about each other. They go back and believe that we all are crazy. Because what it does is it downgrades each of us as professionals. And when I go into a classroom and a kid says something about the teacher's not this, I stop them in their tracks. I never allow a student to say something negative about a teacher or professional. As a professional, I'll be the one to communicate. I don't let children do that. And it's the same thing for us as professionals. We cannot downgrade each other and expect the public to respect us. So those are two things that I think we have to work hard on. Again, developing a strategic plan that would come through us as the board of superintendent, our retreats, and then putting together the requests. And you know who those key people are out in the greater community. We have those lists of individuals, invite them to come in on a Saturday. And we would get them in by 8:30 or 9 and have them out by 1:30 or 2. There would be an active engagement. We would take participation. We'd ask them things. We'd be in the small groups, and we would have facilitators and recorders. We'd bring that information, then we'd streamline it. We would create then a strategic task force, and now those members would understand they have a role. They're made up of bus drivers, cooks, cafeteria workers, classified teachers in the classroom, administrators, and central office staff, along with hopefully a board or 2 board member representatives on that. So that's the step you have to take. You have to take a multiple prong, but it really starts on letting everybody know about expectations and then communicating what we need for the greater community of our Madison Parish.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. Mr. Sims?
Mr. Payne,
Yes, sir.
going back a little bit to part of what Ms. Richardson asked in her first question. My question to you is to describe your view of the roles of the school board and the superintendent, and what is the ideal relationship between these two offices?
Well, your question is a $1 million question, Mr. Sims. I think the most ideal starts with a common respect of each other, that we respect one another professionally, that we converse and we are professional at all times, that if we have indifference, we do that in a professional manner, but we always show respect. But the greatest of part starts with board retreat, where we set vision and goals that we want to accomplish year 1, 2, 3 in that manner. The role of board and superintendent, I believe you have to work at that, and the work starts with how you take it on in your retreat, and you bring out how will you go about addressing Mr. and Mrs. Public or the media when they come and throw a microphone. Who's the spokesperson? Do you have everybody talking, or do you have a process that you want to happen? You have to talk about that because it will happen. My experience shows that they will show up, and you just don't want somebody saying something. You have to have that channel. You also have to have a communication that we can talk, because in Louisiana, I think we can have up to 2 board members at a time, unless it's changed. I don't know if Act 1 has changed that, but you can meet. And I believe in networking, meeting with board members, finding out what have you heard out in the community, what are the things that we have to address. That's the thing, those are the things that you have to do. It's a working process that never stops. You have to continue to do that, as well as having retreats where you come together and you flush out those things that you see as a board member, believing that we have to address what I see as a superintendent. So again, in answering you, it starts with the role is that you are policymakers as board. The superintendent is your day-to-day operations person. You're my boss, and you have the responsibility to let me know when there's something out there that you hear that we need to address. And it's important that that happens. And that means it could be once a week, it could be twice a week, it could be a Friday update. Any of those things that we come up with as ways to network with you and the board and keep you informed. Hope I answered your questions. Great question.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. Mr. President.
Mr. Payne, I'm not an educator. I feel that we talk in generalities. This is a parish that has a very low reading retention level. These children are in upper grades and cannot read. Now, you have to take them where they are. But what's your plan, or what would you do to get these children where they needed to be? Because they cannot do the math anymore if they can't read, unless they have someone reading it to them. What's your plan to take these children from where they are to some kind of proficiency in reading and understanding?
Well, Mr. President, I always have a philosophy of members of the board. You have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. First and foremost, I talked about reading. You have to have a reading program that starts with the Big Five. But if you have students that are at secondary level and they're having struggles with reading, you then have to create those study skills sessions where those students are exposed and you give them a double dose. Rather than having an elective, you double dose them in reading if that's the short deficit. You have to do that in order for those kids to be empowered. The reason is that if you don't help empower those young students, what they will end up doing is while you and I are working, they're going to come visit your house at some point because they're frustrated, they are upset that everybody around them is being successful. Life is going on, they're being left behind. So principals are an integral part of it, their recommendations, but you must identify through your testing those students who are at deficiency, and you have to attack it. For example, you have Scholastic, you have our outstanding reading program, Read 180, where you can attack it from that. You can also look at Voyager. You can look at working with your libraries to have a read aloud program. And you have to approach it in multiple facets. But the greatest part is to take our principals and recognize who those boys and girls are and refuse to let them become a statistic. We have to have the study skills, and they have to be built in to where those students get a double dose. We identify where they are, if it's phonics, if it's just struggling readers, pre-perm, or whatever it may be.
Okay.
And the scores would be able to tell me that.
Okay,
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, you mentioned Voyager and Reading 180. I don't know anything about them except that I know that we've had them. And I haven't noticed an appreciable improvement as we've struggled to get scores to where they need to be and children in some kind of proficiency. What do you do when you tried it and it's failed? Do you come at it again? What do you do?
Well, first of all, I know both programs. One has a big 5 in terms of phonemic awareness, phonics, comprehensive vocabulary and fluency, and also Read 180. I want to know how often are people at work, because if adults don't come to work, students do not grow. So you have to look at those things. The second part is you have, in addition to those, you have what we call AR, and it's accelerated reader, which gives you lexile of students where they are in terms of reading and struggles. And that doesn't cost a lot to have the AR program. It's a math and it's a reading. So you have 3 possibilities. But in answering you, I can't tell you why you haven't. I would look at, things have changed. I told you last time I was here, the rules have changed. Every time you start getting growth, the rules change. But you have to attack it based on what you identify as your greatest needs. Then we have to look through our strategic planning, put the resources where our greatest needs are. That's how you have to attack that. You can't put a Band-Aid on it. You have to go back and determine what is the greatest program to get the greatest result. If you had Read 180, the only way Read 180, in my observation, was successful is that either the parent that was in the class or the teacher that was running effectively, because you do a double dose. You have kids for 2 hours to read 180. First hour, it's small group, then they go on to computer instructions, and then you have reading manuals that those students read beyond school that you engage parents in. So to get the success, it's an engagement. For Voyager, you have to train your teacher staff, and it has to be effective and efficient. If you lose the staff, you train staff and you lose them, they go somewhere else, you got to start all over. So attrition, people leaving, it could be all things that can happen, but I can tell you, I know those programs will help you. And AR is another, as I said, accelerated reading and math is another outstanding program. The programs are only as good as the people who are running them, and the accountability starts with principals, assistant principals at schools. I hope I answered your question. We've got a tremendous question, Mr. President.
Okay, Ms. Payne, Ms. Jackson.
First, I want to apologize to you.
Thank you for being with us, Captain.
What's right is not always what's popular. I want to know how can, using a district that don't want
Did that all right?
to move forward. We're more worried about employees and not.
Okay, that's right. That's a question for me. Okay. Let's see, Ms. Jackson answered the $1 million question. The first and foremost, your district cannot be seen as an employment agency. You hire anybody that's breathing, a cousin of a cousin. One advantage for me is that I don't have any cousins, I don't have any third wives, I don't have any girlfriends in your community. So therefore, I don't have ownership to anybody. I come with a clean slate. I'm a believer in Christ. I put it first, and I let everybody know accountability starts from day one. You cannot see, when you're in a hole and you're fighting for your life, as a swimmer and one who would go and took first aid and save people, the one thing you never do is let a person who's drowning put their hands on you, because what they'll seek to do, Mr. Jackson, is try to pull you down and drown you also. You have to throw out the lifeline to them, throw it out, let them connect, and then you help them get back to safe ground. When you look at a system as a whole, you're not the only system in the United States nor in Louisiana that's failing. But employees have to have a spirit about themselves. See, it's not enough to go to church on Sunday, but you don't come to work on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, and you want to be paid. Employees have to take a responsibility because the children who come to school, elementary children, when their teacher doesn't come, they get sick because they look to their teacher as the person who's dependent. Staff members who are at other levels, everybody has to take accountability and recognize that to move forward, it means we must be committed. We have to understand that we can get additional dollars for staff and get results. We can bring children back from the charter school when parents see that we have viable, we have committed, we have dedicated faculty and staff who work above and beyond. I believe in looking at things to inspire kids. Science, Math Academy. Work with the agencies or businesses. I talked about the agriculture co-op. I'd like to get you to come in, energy. I'd like to get you to come in and sponsor scholarships so we can recruit kids to come in for 8-week sessions. The things that you have to do is help faculty and staff understand that nobody can exceed in this journey without a commitment of faith every day. And we have to do it. My message to everyone when I would come about and going to visit, I like to go to school early because I like to see who shows up and who's running in front of the children, who are beating the kids out the door. Because children tell their parents, and we have to overcome that. Okay? Negativity breeds negativity unless you have a strategy to encourage faculty and staff. But also, let me show you this, and to you as members of the board. Like we honor children, I believe you got to honor faculty. I had a golden, didn't know at the time, a Golden Apple Award. This was a Golden Apple. Middle school principal with 1,000 children had a Golden Apple Award for staff who was doing exceptional things. Didn't know it was that good. But when you gave them an extra prep period, you gave them a lunch for being something exceptional, the custodians are getting your school clean, and you come in and recognize them and give them plaques and honor them. Adults, you may not pay them more money, but when you recognize them, you bring pride and things back. So in answering you, I think you have to approach it in a multiple way. But we have to reward and recognize and help build the spirit among our faculty and staff, including bus drivers, including cafeteria managers. I like to go to schools early, and I like to go to cafeteria, and I try to see how our children greet. I like to talk to bus drivers and talk about how you greet children is how children show up at school. And if you don't treat me well, I have a bad attitude. So it's not just one thing. And I hope I've answered your question because I'm sure you have to approach it in a multiple way. But I don't have a problem telling people that tomorrow's your last day if I see you not showing up to work. Or better yet, I go on social media and you tell me you've been out sick for 3 weeks and you're in New York and you're partying and it comes up on the deal that you got this up here. All those are things that we have to deal with. And I know I've seen like this very there are what I've said, but what I've tried to give you is perspective of what I do have to take. And like I said, I don't have a third cousin or a second girlfriend or another wife in town. I come with a slate committed to make a difference. And that's how I would approach it. It was a very good question. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
Any follow-up? If not, Mr. Payne, we will allow you 5 minutes to provide any other additional information or share any other information that you would like to do so at this time.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I know the board's had opportunity to make calls and communicate with professionals about who they may think I or who I am as a person. You know, when you journey, things occur. Sometimes it's not the way you would like for it to occur. But in that, the one thing I will share with the board in this session is about my professional journey over the 39 and a half years. Whether I've been in a school, middle school of 1,000, whether I've been in elementary school of 850, or a district of 1,700, or a district of 5,000. The work ethic, the dedication, the commitment to get results is number one in my heart. And your district is no different as a superintendent. My relationship with each of you, the board president, each of you is as board members are critical in order for us to turn around. And, I believe that the opportunities to come, I would do everything in my power. I would seek to live in the community. Opportunity was here because it's important that parents, others see you, that you engage, you participate, and that you want to make a difference. So with that tonight, I thank you for this opportunity. I'm always thankful to God Almighty for guiding me, and 39 and a half years that I've had this opportunity to work in public education. And I wish you well on your journey and your decision on who you bring to lead your system.
Thank you. At this time, if you have any questions, I thank you,
I just, my question is, the timeline that you have as a board that you'd like to see someone come aboard, because you've done a national search, so I know that you very much want to have a leader that brings broad base to the table. But what is your timeline that you...
Well, officially, we're looking for January 1st, the person to officially report, but the thought is the board officially decide tonight the exact date that we're going to select the superintendent. So if you want that date, if it goes as planned, you can call tomorrow and talk with Ms. Williams. She'll give you the information. Okay?
All right.
Again, Mr. Payne,
I thank you. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry. You have...
No, I just thank you, each of you tonight, for the opportunity. Ms. Jackson, thank you for coming. You have a few minutes questions.
Okay, we certainly appreciate you coming. If you're going back home tonight, we want you to drive safely.
Yes, sir. Yes. I go back with tomorrow.
Now look,
We all have to be somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
we don't want you to
1:30 come
leave and safe because we're going into executive session and you will probably be invited to the executive session.
Okay,
So you can go back to the central office,
Okay.
a young lady or a young man will come and get you.
Okay, and I'll wait
call.
on that. Okay. Yeah, thank you very
You
much.
can take it easy.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Yes, all right, questions, good question, thank you.
Been chosen as one of our finalists. We're pleased that you can continue to express interest in the Madison Parish School Board Superintendent. Again, congratulations. Nothing has changed as it relates to the protocol. We're going to allow you up to 10 minutes to tell the board and the public information about yourself or your background or any other information at this time that you would like to share. With that being said, you can start your comments.
My name is Benita Barnes Young. I am a native of Tallulah, Louisiana. I have 16 years of education experience, and that experience began as a substitute teacher, actually, for a very brief time prior to me relocating to Philadelphia. Once returning back, I began teaching kindergarten and taught kindergarten for 3 years. Moved on to teach first grade for 4 years and relocated to Vicksburg for a short stint for 3 years in which I taught 7th grade mathematics and pre-algebra. I returned to Madison Parish and as an assistant principal at Wright Elementary, and after 1 year was moved to principal of Wright Elementary. Was then promoted to middle school for 4 years, and this is where I currently reside. I have a bachelor's of science in business administration and, in business marketing from Southern University. I received my teacher education certification from Louisiana Tech. I have a master's degree from Mississippi College. I have an educational specialist degree in educational leadership from Mississippi College. I currently was recently continued or finished my coursework in educational leadership with a focus in curriculum instruction from Mississippi College, in which now I am in the dissertation stage. I am principal at Madison Middle School and have been there for a little over 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Let me acknowledge Mr. Hamilton had to leave. He does plan to return. At this time, we would engage ourselves in Q&A where you will be asked questions from the members and you will be expected to give you a response. The first question will come from me. I will read it twice. You were recently employed as superintendent of the Madison Parish School, at your first meeting with your financial staff, you learned that the projected student count for 15-16 was actually less by approximately 150 students, which will result in a deficit of $750,000 in the general fund budget. What immediate step would you take to address this problem? Again, you were recently employed as superintendent of the Madison Parish School. At your first meeting with your financial staff, you learned that the projected student count for 15-16 was actually less by approximately 150 students, which will result in a deficit of $750,000 in the general fund budget. What immediate steps would you take to address this problem?
Very good question, and also with that count being as large as it is, or would be proposed, the very first step I would take would be to look at the district's budget, to find out where the funds are, and to determine what has been our current state of spending, or what our spending pattern was. Looking at that, we're going to better understand what projected expenses we'll probably have, and that includes whether it's maintenance, construction, repairs, as well as instructional, teachers, personnel, and so forth. From there, we'll make a determination as to where those cuts would be. That would be talking to the finance committee, which consists of the board members, and learning of their desires as to what we need to do, what steps we need to take. From there, talking to our human resource or our business manager, we would have to understand what types of spending and expenses we have, whether how much are we spending in bills and utilities each month, what areas we can actually reduce. First would be the number one priority. We need to cut our spending in electricity, or those bills of transportation, to see what other areas that possibly the schools can incur, and what other funds are available, whether it's grant funds that we can use to kind of offset some of those expenses.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Davis?
Due to the fact that our district is low and a grade average, and it's been like that for quite a while, do you think that you would have the heart to ask your staff to reapply and see what can take place from that?
For any superintendent, I think that would be a difficult choice to make and having to do. But doing what is first and foremost was necessary for children. And during my first interview, that was my groundwork, my premises, was to keep children first. And if we understand that if that's something that our district would need to do to reduce the staff size because of the funds, the lack of funds available, then if that's what the board desires, that's definitely what we'll have to do. Looking at where our needs are would play a major factor in determining what persons, or what positions rather, not persons, but what positions are essential and what positions can be alleviated or merged. So yes, I would have the heart to do that, and I know that it would be challenging, but first and foremost is what our kids need most.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Richardson?
I have two questions. If you believe that the school board was overstepping their authority or trying to micromanage the operation of the school, how did you handle that?
First, I know that, like I mentioned in the first interview, that is the Act 1 gives the superintendent authority to do quite a bit. But my desire is to work with the board. If I feel that the board or particular individuals were overstepping the boundaries, I think we would, first of all, have a relationship. We would have to develop a rapport whereas I can speak to them and let them know this is an area, of course, that typically is left up to the superintendent and to the board as a whole to make those decisions. But if those decisions are based upon personal gain or a particular interest group, then that is, of course, something that I think would be detrimental to our school and to our kids. And in the past, that has been our pattern. We focus more on personal gain and personal ideas as opposed to our kids and what was best for our children. And so with that relationship, I would hope to deal with the board members. I believe that we would understand our boundaries, what areas would first and foremost be my area to stay in, per se, and what areas that the board would cover. And that would be one of the very first things in my first 60-day transition, is to explain and understand the protocols of the board and set some groundwork or some framework as to how we'll operate as a team.
The other question I have is about sales tax. Do you feel that the school board should be in the sales tax collection business?
Well, I believe schools have been, it is a business. And I understand, and we operate just as a business. Yes, I do believe if that is where we can get funds from to aid in our goals and our visions for the school, if the sales tax is a need, whereas we can utilize those funds to take care of instructional supplies, instructional needs of personnel, then if those funds are essential to help us operate, then I think that would be what, of course, that is needed, those sales tax funds, and we would be the person I would think would take care of that. We would determine where the funds would go as opposed to the city or someone who's not within the school district having to make that determination.
Okay, Mrs. Hargrave, great.
Yes, Ms. Young. How would you, if elected superintendent, propose to build public pride and trust, sustain fiscal integrity, and raise the educational standards within the Madison Parish School District?
Building pride. The pride actually has to come from within. I believe, but of course, when we set standards and expectations and hold persons accountable for those expectations, then of course, I think everything else normally falls in line. When we develop a rapport with family and community and they know that they can actually trust the board, the superintendent, the teachers, the principals, then of course, everything else will come natural. So building that pride, again, it comes from having a trusting relationship. Not so one-sided, but having a trusting relationship whereas the parents can trust the school and the schools can trust the parents to help us in areas in which we need help. And the second part, I'm sorry.
Sustain fiscal integrity and raise the educational standards.
That is very important. The fiscal responsibility, whether it's from the school level or from the central office level, we have to understand the needs of our schools and understand what needs to take precedence over everything else. And right now is making sure that our kids are learning, making sure that our kids have the necessary supplies and materials as well as our teachers. Our teachers need to know that we trust them to do their job. Once they've been hired, they sign a contract, we have to trust them to do what we ask them about what they've been hired to do. So when it comes to fiscal responsibility, we have to know not to throw money to the wind, per se. We have to know, and it goes back and keeping in line with the budget, making sure where our funds are actually earmarked for, that those funds are being spent in those areas and not just spending haphazardly just because we have funds and spending those funds loosely. We have to have a focus and a vision as to how we're going to spend those funds and what areas are priority. And those areas that are not priority, that's not essential at that time, then of course those things can take a back seat. But those things that are priority, main, fundamental, or foundational to the success of our school district, those are the things where we have to focus our money as well as our attention.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Ms. Young. Mr. Sims?
Mrs. Young, describe your view, or define, if you will, your opinion of what the roles of the school board and the superintendent are, and what is the ideal relationship between these two offices.
Right. The school board primary responsibilities are to set policies, to review the finances, to ensure that we are being held accountable, whether it's at the school office as well as at the school level, and to ensure that those policies are being enforced. The superintendent position is to manage those policies per se. They are the enforcers to ensure that those policies are being carried out. The ideal relationship between the superintendent and the board is to have that professional working experience relationship, whereas we have one vision, and that one vision is keeping our kids first and foremost on our minds. If that one vision, if we all can agree that our kids are in need, that Tallulah or Madison Parish School District is struggling, then I believe that we have fought half the battle there. The ideal relationship, again, begins with establishing those rapport between board and superintendent and making sure that we have that relationship and know where each person actually stands. And there's 8 of you. So knowing that where each one, what you value, that would be one of the conversations during the board retreat, making sure that I understand each and every individual's concerns as well as what your missions and goals are for Madison Parish School District. Once we've established that individual, we have to come up with a group or a team goal and vision so that we can all agree upon one thing. And if that one thing centers around our children, then again, as I said, we fought half the battle. So from there, if our team can communicate honestly with one another, superintendent and board, and if we lay aside our personal differences, because I do know some days we will agree and some days we will not agree. But if we can agree to disagree on a professional level and keep it there, then of course we're all on the same page. And I believe that there cannot be dissension between board and superintendent in front of the public's view, because they understand and have understood that there has been division between board and superintendent. So if the board understands the superintendent, if the board trusts the superintendent to do his or her job, then of course, and the superintendent trusts the board members, all 8 have his or her back, then the schools, the principals, and everyone else in the community know that that is a trusting relationship, that they are working cohesively on one common vision. And once that common vision is realized, then of course Madison will excel. We will become the premier district. We will become that beacon of light that I believe that Madison can be.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Young, Ms. Brett?
I'm not an educator, so I don't always understand the language or the programs, okay? But I do know that Madison Parish children are some of the scores for reading are some of the worst in the state. Now, I feel this is a #1 need. I would like to know how you plan to address this, whether it's elementary or high school, to improve their reading ability and understanding.
Absolutely. Being a former kindergarten and first grade teacher, I understand the needs and the skills that a student must obtain prior to going to the next grade. And also being right in the middle, at the middle school, I have children in the school who are reading on a 2nd and 3rd grade level, unfortunately, who are in 7th and 8th grade, and it's disheartening. One thing that I do know, that if we hire the most qualified and competent individuals, and we give them the necessary supplies and materials that they need, and of course, and hold them accountable, and making sure that we have leaders who understand instruction, who knows how to help teachers when they begin to struggle. That is part of the battle. The other part is making sure that we have programs that are in support of our vision. All programs are not designed equally. And those programs, we have to train our teachers how to use them. Because I understand that that has been most of our problem. Teachers have not had the adequate training that they were supposed to have in order to use these programs effectively. We have a lot of programs. We have probably more than many other districts in this state. But training our staff how to use them and use them effectively, that has been part of the problem. Our children are competent in using technology, but now we have to make sure that our staff is trained. And one of the areas that I find that we cannot train our teachers as children sitting in the classroom. We must have that time, either if it's on Saturdays, if it's during the summer, they have to be trained before the kids get into the classroom. Show them information, who's coming to the classroom. Design strategies and instructions so that your instruction supports, or your strategies support the instruction. Know the kids in your classroom. Have a heart for those kids. Know that reading is essential. And if that is the case, then of course we have to make sure that those programs that have not proven to be beneficial to our kids and to our teachers, they have to be eliminated. And only use the programs that have proven to be beneficial. We have quite a few programs, like I mentioned, and some do not coincide with the others. And so it becomes a bit of a battle trying to use all of them, and none are being used effectively. So training, more so professional development, is essential. And we need to have some persons who actually know our teachers, know the needs of our teachers, and not just providing professional development for the sake of providing professional development. They need to have an understanding of Madison and our unique needs, and then knowing how to use these skills in the classroom to be effectively. And it's not a one-shot deal. You just cannot do a one-time training and say that's it until next year. It has to be ongoing. And teachers have to learn how to monitor their kids. And when they monitor the progress of their kids, they begin adjusting their instruction. Once they adjust their instruction, they'll understand they're getting these kids to move up the continuum, and those kids begin to progress. But that has been one of our downsides. We focus more on initiatives or programs and not so much on how are we going to help our teachers help our kids.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Jackson?
How would you handle, I could say, the community and a district that has the mindset that only think that a male can lead?
Well, we fight mindsets often, quite often, and one thing that I know that women have come a very long way. We've come a very long way in education, particularly because I remember at a time when I've only saw, as a kid, I've only seen male principals. But I stand here and I have colleagues in the back who are female principals. And I think we can do just as well as a male. And, but not to sound biased, I do know that it depends on the person's skills, not so much as whether or not their gender. It depends on their skill level. And being a female with expertise in business, as well as instruction, as well as in leadership, I think you need to look at the person's skill level more so than gender.
Thank you. Ms. Young, Ms. Hamilton?
Mrs. Young, if need be, and if the district would have to implement a RIF, what would be your procedure for implementing a RIF?
I do know that a RIF is something definitely that no board superintendent would want to do. And Madison would probably would not want to face ever again. But of course that goes along with the lines of spending, how much funds we can get. My very first thought would be to speak with the business manager to get an understanding of what funds are available, where our spending patterns are, what we place emphasis on and what we can do without. The second step I would take definitely would be to look at the contracts and evaluations for the last 3 years of each and every individual in the district. Third, speaking to the finance committee of the board and understanding that here is the funds that we have available. I've evaluated and reviewed contracts. I would also make sure that there is a rubric how this person or position, more or less the position, will be eliminated if it comes to that part. We're looking at positions more so than people. And those positions may have to be merged in order to save the district money so that we can continue to operate. So after that rubric or that matrix has been designed, and speaking to the board so I can get their input, I would definitely want to speak with the legal attorney to find out what ramifications we would probably incur if something happens, if we have something like this. And speaking to the legal attorney from there, we'll probably speak with, go back to the board to make sure that everything is in order, to communicate what the legal attorney has discussed, and then from there, design a letter and letting those persons knowing what positions would be eliminated or which positions would be merged. And from there, offer them other positions that may be available in the district. And making sure that those, of course, are sent certified and have that documentation to indicate that those persons have received those letters. And just finalizing that would be to just communicate that too with the local newspaper and also, if need be, with the news media so that it would have a true picture of our financial state as well as our academic needs, and know that it's not an easy choice because, of course, many persons may come forward and say it was one-sided, but we want to be fair, and I believe fairness and honesty, truth will always prevail. So we want to make sure that those necessary steps are being followed, and once they have been followed, then of course I think we'll close all the gaps of doubt with the community as well as with individual persons who may be affected.
Okay, I have a question, Ms. Young. Our policy says tenure alone cannot be deciding factor to release employees. Do you feel that tenure should be considered in your deliberation when you get ready to cut staff?
I believe that should not be the sole premise, just like the policy states. I believe the effectiveness of that particular person should be weighed more heavily than tenure. And that simply says that you may have an outstanding 5-year teacher, and you may have a teacher who has probably been average, and she may have 22 years of experience. But what's the goal? If the goal is to improve achievement, I think the idea for the board and the superintendent would be to get the best person in front of our kids. So tenure alone would not be the deciding factor in determining what position or person would be eliminated.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Young. At this time, you have 5 minutes to share any information that you would like to share that you didn't do so in your first presentation. Okay.
Well, my question to the board is, should I be selected as superintendent? What areas of...
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Now, you're going to have an opportunity to ask questions to the board.
Okay.
But at this time, you can share any information you would like to for 5 minutes.
Oh.
Then you'll be given an opportunity to ask the board members questions that you may have.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Well, one question may be that some folks may ask. I've been a principal for middle school for the last several years. And of course, I've been a principal at the elementary schools. And the question may be to me, and I've been asked this question, why haven't the scores at the middle school increased? And I would definitely tell them the truth. The truth is, I have those students for 2 years. and those students come to me with a severe deficit. I have several of my teachers sitting in the back, and they can attest to the fact that at this point in time, approximately 85 to 90% of our kids in middle school are reading on the second grade level. That is devastating. So when you have a principal, teacher, they have the supplies and materials they need, they have the training they need, but we have to have something to work with. I would definitely like to see at least students coming to us reading on the 4th and 5th grade level, if not coming reading on level. But if they're coming to the schools reading on the 2nd and 3rd grade level, and we only have 2 years and to increase their performance, but yet we test our kids on the 7th and 8th grade level. To any person knowing education and knowing instruction, that is almost absolutely impossible to do in a 2-year time span. So I know that that has been asked of me. What can we do? Our teachers are working overtime, and of course, the things that I've asked for, some of those things I've gotten. But for the last couple of years, unfortunately, we were in district. I understand the finances of the district, and we may not have been able to get the certified teachers we needed in front of the kids, knowing that our kids are reading on a 2nd and 3rd grade level. So that's to say it's not faulting anyone. It's just realizing that we are struggling, that we have a problem. And this problem has to be eliminated. That our kids deserve better. And they deserve qualified, certified, competent teachers standing before them. And if we can get that, if the board and the superintendent can agree, that if we can alleviate some other things, make sure that we have certified, competent people in front of our kids, then of course it doesn't matter. Give us a little time and our kids will be able to read, because a competent teacher will know these are the things that must take place in order to get our kids to grow, in order to improve our reading performance and to improve our math performance. Otherwise, we're not going to do that with them, ever. So I know that has been asked, and I wanted to alleviate any doubt, but we have been working extra hard. I can say that Madison Middle School have some of the strongest and some of the most supportive teachers there. But we felt the rip, and we've also felt the budget cuts because, of course, our staff was not to the level of expertise that we expected.
Okay. You have any questions at this time you'd like to ask the board?
Yes, I have one question right now, I think. My first question to the board would be, again, if I'm selected as superintendent of Madison Parish School District, I know that you mentioned the most pressing part of your vision, the most pressing vision or goal for you right now is to increase student performance. To what extent are you willing to take to make sure that we increase student performance at that school level?
And when you say to what extent, what are you saying?
To what extent, to what support will the board provide to the superintendent of the school to ensure that we get our student scores up?
Yeah. To be honest with you, having served as principal in the district, you probably have a better understanding about the financial affairs of the district than most. But I think the district was this to say whatever financial resources we have, it's not all about financial resources. But I think as a superintendent, you would have a significant impact upon personnel, you know, bringing the best qualified, certified person to the district and to try to change the culture of the district and change the climate of the school. That's my opinion. Any other questions? Or anyone else would like to comment?
I think you are asking, will the board support you in getting the materials and the things that you need in order to bring these children up to par, or at least start them on their way?
Yes, ma'am, that is my question. So I guess what I really need to ask, and to be honest, will I have the support of all 8 members of the board? Because having 4 or 5 persons will not do, because of course that would bring division amongst the board, will bring division between board and superintendent. I would need to know that, again, remember I told you I'm not a cliquish person, I don't do particular groups. I need to know that the board will support the superintendent, no matter who he or she may be, and that if we have a particular goal or vision and we're all on the same page, will I count on each and every individual to, they're going to hold me accountable, but can I hold you to that same level of high expectations to know that you will support me, and that it's never about a person, that it's about our children. Those are the most important people to me. Those are the kids. And I feel that way as a principal. I felt that way as a teacher because some of your kids have taught. So, and I still feel that same way. And I just want to make sure that for each one of you sitting here, that I would have the support of the board.
I think that as far as materials and supplies or teachers are concerned, we'll go as far as we can with what money that we have. We can't give you what we don't have.
Absolutely.
But we will, I think that you'll find us more than willing to support children and their education. At least that's my feelings, is that, you know, if it comes to priorities, we can settle. When you run out of dollars, you're just out of dollars.
Yes, I understand that, and I totally respect that, Ms. Presley, because that is what we need. We need to make sure that we're on the same page. And I know that at some point, there's not going to be, the funds are not going to be there. But as far as the personnel or the support from the board, that is what is key to me. I need to make sure that because it's not going to work if it's only my vision. It would only work if it's all 9 of us.
Yes, I understand Ms. Young where you're coming from. I know how it appears in the public because of talk, the street committee. Because as if, you know, I'm here, it's like we are more divided. You know, we have ones meet, talk amongst themselves. We know how it goes. So we ourselves need to work on us. You know, we need to be unity around here. Because it is, you know, it's not. No sense in faking it, it's not. Everybody got their own little angle, and we need to really realize what's important is the children.
Anyone else would like to make a comment? If not, Ms. Young, we certainly appreciate you coming and sharing this time with us. We're going to ask the person to come and transport you back, provide transportation back to the central office. We're going to ask you that you remain there. We're going to invite you back to be available for executive session. Again, thank you. Good luck.